In the winter of 1933, in a grimy little speakeasy in the Bronx, 5 men came up with what they believed was the perfect business plan. Step 1. Take out life insurance on a customer. Step 2. Kill the customer. Step 3. Get rich. Simple, clean, genius. There was just one tiny flaw in the plan, and the flaw was the customer. Because out of every drunk in New York City, these geniuses managed to pick the one man who apparently could not be killed. This is a true story. Every ridiculous thing you are about to hear actually happened. Let us meet our villains. The bar was run by Tony Marino, a man whose speakeasy was so illegal it did not even have a name. His crew: Joseph Murphy, the bartender; Francis Pasqua, the local undertaker, which is already a red flag when your drinking buddy measures people with his eyes; Daniel Kreisberg, a fruit seller; and Hershey Green, a taxi driver. Remember the taxi driver? He becomes important later. Together, the newspapers would eventually give them a name that sounds like a failed rock band: the Murder Trust. Now, why murder? Because it was 1933, the Great Depression. Nobody had money, everybody had debts, and Marino's bar was bleeding cash. But there was one thing these men knew: life insurance paid out big, and it paid out double for accidental death. And here is the truly dark part: this crew had already done it once before. A year earlier, Marino had insured a homeless woman, gotten her blackout drunk, and left her in a freezing room with ice water. The insurance company paid without blinking. So as far as the Murder Trust was concerned, this was a proven business model. Enter the victim: Michael Malloy, homeless, jobless, Irish, somewhere around 60 years old, and by every account, one of the gentlest drunks in the Bronx. Mike had no family anyone knew of, no fixed address, and one single hobby, which was drinking anything that was put in front of him. To the Murder Trust, he looked perfect. No relatives to ask questions, a body already half destroyed by alcohol, a man who, in their professional opinion, was practically dead already. All they had to do was give him a little push. It is at this point that the universe started laughing. First, the paperwork. The trust took out 3 insurance policies on Mike under a fake name worth over $3,500. In 1933, that was 2 years of salary. With the double accident payout, it was a small fortune. Now all Mike had to do was die. And knowing Mike, that seemed like a matter of days. Marino opened an unlimited tab. Whatever Mike wanted. On the house, forever. The plan was beautiful in its laziness. Let the man simply drink himself to death. Mike thought he had found the kindest bar in America. Week 1 of Operation Free Drinks did not go as planned. Mike drank and drank from opening until closing every single day, and instead of dying, he started to look better. The free food and the warm room were the healthiest lifestyle Mike had enjoyed in years. He gained weight. He got color in his cheeks. One conspirator complained that Mike was drinking them into bankruptcy faster than he was drinking himself to death. The scoreboard after round 1: Mike, 1, Murder Trust, 0. Time for chemistry. The trust swapped Mike's whiskey for wood alcohol. Quick science lesson: wood alcohol is methanol. It is what industrial solvents are made of. A few shots can blind you. A few more can kill you. This was not a gamble. This was poison, poured into a glass, over and over, all night. Mike knocked back shot after shot of industrial solvent, smacked his lips, and said it was smooth. He asked for another. Then he asked how their evening was going. The trust stared at him the way you would stare at a talking horse. So they escalated. Turpentine in the glass. Mike drank it. Horse liniment, which is muscle rub for animals. Mike drank it. They stirred in rat poison. Mike drank it. And then, and I need you to understand this is documented, he asked for a refill. Somewhere around this point, the trust stopped thinking of Mike as a man and started thinking of him as a science experiment. One of them reportedly wondered if Mike even could die. The oysters were next. Raw oysters, lovingly marinated for days in wood alcohol. Mike ate a plateful and said they were delicious. Then came the sandwich. And even by this story's standards, the sandwich is special. The trust took a tin of rotten sardines, left it open until the fish had fully turned, then mixed in shrapnel, actual metal, carpet tacks, shavings from the tin itself. They pressed this between 2 slices of bread and served it to Mike as a snack. The plan was that the metal would shred him from the inside, which is less of a murder plan and more of a cartoon. Mike ate the entire thing. He reportedly enjoyed it. He may have asked for a second sandwich. The man ate hardware and asked for seconds. Quick pause. How was he surviving this? Honest answer, nobody fully knows. Decades of heavy drinking can build a frightening tolerance to alcohols, and some poisons work slower on a body that treats toxins as a food group. Plus, luck. Absurd, biblical amounts of luck. Doctors have looked at this case for 90 years and mostly concluded that Michael Malloy was simply built different. The newspapers would later call him the Rasputin of the Bronx, after the Russian monk who survived poison, bullets, and a river. Except Rasputin eventually died from all that. Mike was just getting warmed up. The trust decided the problem was the indoor setting. So one night in February, when it was 14 below zero, they waited for Mike to pass out, carried him to a park, dumped him in a snowbank, tore his shirt open, and poured 5 gallons of ice water on his chest. Then they went home to sleep, confident that no human being could survive a night like that. The next evening, the bar door opened. It was Mike. He was wearing a borrowed coat. He apologized for being late. And this is real. He said he had caught a bit of a chill. New plan, brute force. They hired Hershey Green, the taxi driver, promised him $150, and told him to run Mike over. They propped drunk Mike up in the middle of a quiet street, and Green accelerated to 50 miles per hour. At the last second, Mike, unconscious on his feet, somehow swayed out of the way. So they lined him up and did it again. This time the car connected, and to be extra thorough, Green backed up and ran over him a second time. They left him broken on the pavement, went back to the bar, and toasted a job finally done. There was one problem with celebrating: no body. Mike had been scooped up by an ambulance, and the trust could not claim accident insurance without a corpse. They scanned newspapers for his obituary. Nothing. They called morgues, pretending to be worried relatives. Nothing. For 3 weeks, Michael Malloy simply vanished. And then on a quiet evening, the door creaked open, and Mike shuffled in with a fractured skull, a broken shoulder, and a big smile. "Sorry for the absence, boys," he said. He had been in the hospital after, quote, "a terrible car accident." Then he sat down and asked for the usual, "Let us check in on the murder trust's finances." They had now spent months on this project. They had paid for an unlimited bar tab, industrial chemicals, gourmet spoiled seafood, a hitman taxi driver, and were still paying the insurance premiums every single week to keep the policies alive. The math had stopped mathing. This murder was now officially costing more than it would ever pay out. A rational group of men would have cut their losses. The murder trust, however, had become obsessed. This was no longer about money. Mike had to die on principle. On the night of February 22nd, 1933, the murder trust finally stopped being creative. They waited until Mike passed out, carried him to a rented room, put one end of a rubber hose in his mouth, and connected the other end to the coal gas jet in the wall. Carbon monoxide. Silent, boring, and effective. It took less than an hour. After 6 weeks, over 20 attempts, poison, frostbite, and 2 rounds with a taxi, Michael Malloy was gone. The trust paid a doctor to write pneumonia on the certificate and buried him fast in a cheap grave, no questions asked. They finally had their payday, and it lasted about 5 minutes. Here is the thing about a murder committed by 5 guys in a neighborhood bar. Everyone talks. The trust had spent weeks loudly failing to kill a man in front of witnesses. They had offered strangers money to do the job. The whole Bronx basically knew. When rumors of a barroom insurance killing reached the police, detectives pulled the death certificate, found the doctor, and dug Mike up. His body told the whole story. The 5 men were arrested, and the press fell in love with the tale of the unkillable Irishman and the world's most incompetent murder club. The trial was quick. The evidence was overwhelming, partly because half the neighborhood had been offered a chance to participate in the murder. In 1934, Marino, Pasqua, Murphy, and Kreisberg were sent to the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. Hershey Green, the taxi driver, got at least 10 years. Add it up, 4 executions and a decade in prison, all for an insurance payout of $3,500 that they mostly never even collected. Divided 5 ways, they had committed the crime of the century for about $700 each, minus expenses, of which, as we covered, there were many. So what is the moral here? Maybe it is that life insurance fraud is a bad retirement plan. Maybe it is that if the universe clearly does not want someone dead, you should stop arguing with it. Or Maybe it is simpler than that. 5 men decided one freezing winter that a harmless man's life was worth $3,500, and a homeless drunk with nothing to his name beat them 20 rounds in a row without ever knowing he was in a fight. The house always wins. And Mike, ladies and gentlemen, was the house. Rest easy, Iron Mike. Somewhere out there, you are still ordering another round.